sharing has not changed in the next day or two, but it may so far. But I've been posting them. They're all in the same folder. I'm sharing that on the Supervisor community of practice. So I'll make sure to share that again. Okay. Some of you I saw yesterday, and you kind of filled me in on how you're doing. The rest of you in Arlington, Temple, Uvalde, touched base with you guys. How are things?
In Temple, things are okay. I'm trying to. Right now, everyone is almost general ed all day long, and they are going to a resource teacher, and the deaf ed teacher is only teaching writing. And it's very difficult because the resource teacher doesn't want to let go of the deaf ed kids, but they're not getting the type of instruction they need. And a lot of them are just sitting in general ed and have no clue what is going on. So for me, that is very frustrating. So when they're receiving the general ed work remotely, of course, they can't do it. So it's been a huge debacle for me lately.
Yeah, definitely. How much support is your deaf ed teacher able to give remotely?
Well, right now she is giving out reading and language work because the parents, there's been so many stress on the parents about the general ed work. So she is providing it. And we have the interpreters interpreting like videos or PowerPoints, whatever they're sending. And the parents are gravitating towards, of course, the deaf ed assignments because they're more appropriate. And the general ed is basically putting out worksheet after worksheet, where the deaf ed teacher is doing more videos, sign language, different things. So I'm trying to get them to understand over there that it is okay to have deaf ed reading if you're 4 grades behind. Your reading level is so low. It's okay. We don't need to sit in general ed and be clueless. That's not helping either. And just passing everyone on. And then when they were at the campus and I observed, I've observed kids just sitting in general ed and not even doing the assignment everyone else is doing, not being included in the reading groups and stuff. It's a weird situation. I'm not quite sure why it's set up like this. And I keep getting the reason is that's just how we've always done it. But I don't agree with what's going on. So I'm trying to shift their thought process, which has been difficult because I realize no one likes to change.
No. And one thing that occurred to me after you and I chatted about that earlier is you guys are due for peer review this year.
I know, in December.
And so that will actually be, we'll try and fix some things before then.
Okay.
But if nothing else, that's a way that we can get some things into place.
Great.
We'll talk more about that.
That would be awesome. So, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Are any of the rest of y'all having that problem where your kids are not being allowed to be with your staff, either because your district is going full inclusion or it's never been done that way?
Well, for us here in El Paso, it just really depends on where the kids are placed to begin with. For those kiddos that have always been mainstreamed in general ed, well, they're continuing to do that. And as they've said, we have the interpreters working alongside with the teacher, the gen ed teacher, to provide the assistance. Now, that in itself was a little bit difficult because I have a lot of openings for sign language interpreters. And so the people that are in those positions, they're not certified interpreters, they're just subs. So because they were subs, they didn't have access to our program to be joined to Schoology, which is the main platform the district is using. So I had to go through all this. But you know what? It was okay because it goes to show you that you don't know what's going on, what's lurking underneath until something like this comes up and you're like, oh, now I know to do that better, or things like that. For those kids that are in the deaf ed setting, Once again, it's been good. Right now, we're working on this platform for our students that utilize Sign, because they were using Zoom, which everyone loved, the parents loved, but the district has, this week is our last week using Zoom with students. We can still use it with not parents, with adults, like if we have to hold our meetings, but not with students, because we had 3 incidences where the kids were shown inappropriate things because somebody bombed them. So that took that. So they changed us to WebEx. So and it seems like that's the best platform right now compared to the other options that we have with the district, because it's either Schoology Conference or Microsoft Teams. And Schoology Conference is just not good. I mean, the little squares are this big. With Teams, it works. And I saw the video that Twyla put on. The thing is, it always, when the teachers share their screen, what they share has to be web-based. So if it's not web-based, once again, same issue. But with WebEx, I started to work with it yesterday. It's pretty much like Zoom. You can pin the person. You can, even when you share your desktop or whatever, the interpreter can still stay there. So I think that's going to be a good thing for us.
Okay. I don't know much about WebEx. I've been to webinars that have used WebEx. I know that Zoom has things in place to help stop the bombing or to protect from the bombing. And we had a team at Region 11 that was bombed right when this started happening, and we put all the privacy stuff in place and haven't had a problem since then. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that it doesn't happen again. What platforms are the rest of y'all using?
We mostly use Google Hangouts.
Okay.
In Uvalde, we're using Google Meet and Google Classroom.
In Temple, we're using Google Classroom, Google Meet, and Loom.
In Mesquite, we're using Google Classroom, Google Meet, Seesaw for our younger grades.
We're hearing a lot of evidence that there's not, this district is not allowed to use this and is required to use this, but this one's not allowed to use this and is required to use this. So trying to help keep up with making sure that everybody's got whatever training they need on what that looks like with an interpreter. Very interesting. Were you all able to either receive the training from Twyla or access recordings or things on how to make sure your platforms were accessible?
Yes.
Okay. I know she did a ton of trainings, just like in a period of a week. It was a bazillion trainings, it seemed like. Just to make sure everybody was, some were with interpreters, some with teachers, some with parents, so with everybody. So are there training needs that you guys have that haven't already been met either by our team or by your districts or by the internet? Nope, it's not. Okay. I know that one of the things that we've been really working on is making sure that in the, looks like everybody's frozen. Is my computer frozen? My internet is nasty today. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is make sure that in the Facebook groups, we've been posting things, making sure that people have access, and then making sure that we have posted stuff in the Supervisor or in other areas. But if there's additional training that you guys need, please make sure that you let me know. So we, however we need.
I have a question about interpreter training.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, I want them to get their CEUs each year, and we have a few people that we brought in that are wonderful. My people really like them, but it's kind of the same thing every time, you know, or the same people, even different topics or whatever. So do you have any other resources out there, or they like to come to our center on staff development days to get their CEU hours there? So normally I try to find a presenter, but I know that y'all offer some online too. I know we talked about like our interpreters could do some of those staff developments for them, but what do other districts do for their interpreters?
I'll let everybody jump in just a second. We've got probably 20 or more interpreter trainings online. And what some districts have done is they bring everybody in together and then they do those online together. Plus we have a library of over 100 DVDs that we can check out to you that are the same thing, that they bring everybody together. They do the DVD together. The problem with, it's not a problem, but like the DVDs have 1 hour of CEUs for the 1 hour of the DVD, but really where the interpreters are learning is the 2 hours of discussion that they have from that, that we don't have CEUs hooked up for. So that's something in the works of how can we fix that, but that's an option. And you're right, it does tend to be the same people doing the training just because we have such a limited number of people who can do the training that aren't an arm and a leg. But I'd love to hear from the rest of you guys. What type of professional development have you been able to provide for your interpreters?
Since I just started in January, the interpreters, when I talked to them, told me they have not had much training at all. And what we did have a work day at some point before all this happened. And I had my lead interpreter put together a training on what she felt they needed to improve on. We have done that, but I'm glad you asked that question because that's what I was wondering. How do I get more training for them? Because I have a few that probably should that I need to take their BEI test, but are nervous, but they need to go do it. So that's where I have an issue. And then I have a couple who they think they cannot pass, so they're not even trying. So I need to get all these people working towards certification. And I was sending people to like the interpreting conferences in the summer, but I don't know if those will be happening, but to try and get them to test, if that makes sense.
Right. We don't know yet about the interpreter conferences this summer. I'll talk about that in just a little bit though. Okay, what about the rest of you? What are you doing for training for your interpreters?
In Uvalde, we try to keep an eye out of what trainings are happening, and we also attend the summer ones, the CSW or whatever is happening in the summer. We look forward to those actually in the summer. Weekly, we try to meet to discuss the code of ethics, just so everyone stays on the same page with the code of ethics. And if we just stick to the code of ethics, everything goes smoothly. And that's about all. But we keep an eye out on Facebook too, because we'll see trainings, or Health and Human Services also when their trainings pop up. So between all of us, we just try to keep an eye out and see what is happening, and share the emails we get with each other regarding any interpreter training.
On that, the code of ethics, are you guys using the RID one or the EIPA educational one, or both?
Both, actually.
Okay. Okay, awesome. Okay. Other ideas, suggestions?
Where are those code of ethics trainings that you find?
Those are like informal. We just meet weekly and we just go over them informally just so we can, remember our code of ethics and what we should be following. So we just, we
So
just
they're
meet
not
weekly.
official CEU trainings?
No, they're not. No, those are just for us to remember to follow those.
We do have a bunch of code of ethic trainings on the community of practice. One of the activities is a 30-day challenge that can be done, not in 30 days, can be done whatever, but there's 30 different challenges where the person who's doing it would then kind of look at it, and then they have to discuss how they would handle it, things like that. So that could be something you guys could add, Patty, to your meetings as well. But
that sounds awesome. And I did remind them about the community of practice, and we do have some interpreters that have already done some of the trainings on there, but I will talk to them about the 30-day challenge. That sounds like fun.
Okay.
Do you have heard anything about CSW for this summer?
So we have not heard anything yet. As of this time, they are still planning on doing CSW. A lot of it will depend on what the governor requires or allows for summer gatherings. At this time, statewide conference is still on and CSW is still on as usual. Statewide will be lower. We know that a lot of districts are not allowed to even start submitting travel requests till July 1, or are not going to be allowed to travel at all. So we have cut down the number of sessions knowing that we're going to have less people anyway, even if we do have it. If we cancel statewide at this minute, we lose about $80,000, and that puts us bankrupt and not able to do a conference in 2 years. But if we wait until the governor makes the announcement, or until the conference planners say we need to cancel, then we're not out all that money. So that's why that's kind of on hold right now. With CSW, they're just really, really, really hoping that the world will be opened again by then. And that one's out of my control. So is statewide. The C skill shops, we normally have one in North Texas, end of June, beginning of July. We have one in Austin and we have one in Houston. At this time, the one in Austin and the one in North Texas are combined, and they're going to be online. They're the last week in last week in July. And we're working on getting that information changed on the website. If you're already registered for the C Skill Shop for North Texas, that will transfer over to the new dates. If you're registered in Austin, then I'm working with Elaine to find out how we need to handle that. And then if you're planning on going to the one in Houston in August, at this time, that one is still planned for face-to-face, but it may or may not change depending on what stuff. Okay, Laura, have fun with HR, and we'll see you later. So, there's still a lot of unknowns for the summer, just like I know all of the districts are kind of feeling that same thing. One thing I did want to mention about interpreter training, and this is a training that we did in Mesquite already, Jerry, and unless you've had a huge turnover in interpreters, and I think, I'm trying to remember if your teachers were there or not. I don't think they were. I think it was just interpreters. We did a personalized professional development training that we brought to you guys. We've done it at Region 11, and I did it in Laredo earlier this year. And it's really kind of encouraging interpreters, teachers, anybody, kind of do self-assessment and choose what they need to learn and what they need to work on, and then encouraging them to take charge of their own learning, recognizing that just because an interpreter has fallen into their lap, or a training has fallen into their lap, does not necessarily mean that that's the best one for their personal growth. That may be great for getting CEUs, but it shouldn't be about the CEUs. It should be about the personal growth. Some interpreters are really good about that, others not so much. But that is a training that we're moving online as well, which will be an option for interpreters to do as well.
Well, and this was my thinking was, of course, funding. You know, we pay the trainers to come in on that stuff on our staff development days, where in the past our teachers did their own kind of CEUs on their own, such as like the online training or check out DVDs or whatever. Or we pay for them in the summer to go to CSW and stuff. And then we used our interpreters during staff development for our teachers. So it saved us a lot of money that we're paying contract interpreters on those days. So that's where I'm just trying to figure out what to do, I guess. Is it work, you know, keep contract and, you know, put them in a room with, you know, interpreter training, or even if I did out of 4 staff developments, did 2 and 2. Thoughts on that?
So one of the things that we suggested specifically with your staff, because that came up with, but what if we don't get to use our staff development day for PD? So one of the discussions we had is, how could you interpret for your deaf staff at a staff meeting and turn it into PD? Thinking outside the box. Well, think about having, say, 3 interpreters instead of just 2 like you might normally have, and taking turns watch. Okay, I'm interpreting now, and what I need you guys to be watching is I want you to watch my mouth morphemes. How am I using it? I want feedback on that. And so then my partners, my 2 partners that I'm with while I'm interpreting, they are specifically watching my mouth morphemes and giving me feedback on that. Not, am I doing a good job or not? Because that doesn't give me anything to grow on, but specifics. Okay, so now it's my turn to be an observer, and Jerry's there interpreting, and Jerry says, I really am trying to work on my finger spelling. So I need feedback on my finger spelling. So every interpreter, before they actually get into that PD that they're interpreting for somebody else, it is intentionally set up that while, yes, I am providing access for somebody else, that my goal is just providing access is to grow. And so we've made sure that there's the number of interpreters on there, and that we have each set our own personal learning goals before that starts. That looks a little bit different when it comes to CEUs. All of the interpreters have to have 20 CEUs that are general CEUs, so that could count towards that. One of the things that we are trying to work out with BEI is how that could be used as interpreting CEUs. That if we're partnering, giving feedback, doing kind of a mentoring thing, what that would look like from an application standpoint. But if they think of it more of how do I grow and not how do I get enough CEUs, then that's a good way of doing it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So if I do that, I'm just gonna retalk. I want to make sure I'm right. So set their personal learning goals. They interpret in groups, and it's that, you know, peer feedback monitoring on their growth. Okay, for the CEU part, how do I do? Is there something I have to submit to give them the CEUs, or?
So when they would get just a regular staff development certificate for attending that training, and that counts towards their 20 general hours. But one of the things that we're looking into is how could we get, if it's intentionally set up as a mentoring, as a self-assessment, as a self-growth like that, could we work that out for interpreting CEUs? And that's something that we're working on internally. And once we figure that out, we'll let you know. But in the meanwhile, they could get general CEUs.
And how many interpreting CEUs do they have to get?
60.
And that's
They have to
they're
get
for 5 years like we are, right?
5 years. Over 5 years, if they are certified interpreters with BEI, they have to have 20 that are ethics, and those can be any ethics. Those can be interpreting ethics, they could be nursing ethics, they could be ethics for educators, whatever.
Okay.
Then they have to have 20 general, which are any PD. If they go through a Red Cross training, that's general PD. Most of our interpreters in educational settings don't have a problem with getting that because all of the PD that they have to sit through that the district provides counts as general.
Okay.
Then they have to get 60 that specifically is interpreting CEUs. They usually get that through CSW. They can get that if you provide specific interpreting training on your professional development days. They can get that through what we have online, through the videos, the DVDs, things like that. So it's not hard to get 5 years worth of CEUs to get 100
a year. Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
if you actually keep up with it, it is not unusual for us to get a call, say like right now, and say, my 5-year CEUs are due in June and I need 18 hours of this and I need 27 hours of this, help. Like, how is that good for you? That helps you and get hours, but this is about growth. And at that point, you've met your cognitive load. So,
yeah.
Okay. But if anybody working for district, even if you guys don't provide PD, there's enough opportunities for PD, but at some point they do need to take responsibility for their own PD and making sure that they're getting in PD that is really helpful to them.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm sitting in my 15th workshop on fingerspelling, but I'm the fingerspelling queen, how is that helping me? I can always learn, but that may not be what I specifically need.
Well, and things that my elementary people need, such as visual phonics, my high school people don't need that. And so, it's, and then you have to have the space for it and the room for it. And, so, okay. Thank you for your help on that.
Mm-hmm. And that's, yeah, that whole concept of personalized professional development is actually what I'm doing my doctoral dissertation on, because I feel like, I look at the 8 of us that are in this meeting, and there are some of us who have been in education for over 30 years, in deaf ed the whole time. There are people who were probably not even born when some of us graduated from college. And we've all got different years experience. And that doesn't mean that I know more than you or that you know more than me. We all have different backgrounds. So expecting us all to sit in the exact same PD and get exactly what we need isn't going to meet our needs. So what else do we need to be doing to fill in those gaps?
Correct.
And so, I mean, that's a passion of mine. Many of you have heard my soapbox on that, but I feel like building that culture of it's my PD because it's my learning and it's my growth. And then great, you've provided that and that helps me, but not just, well, nobody ever provides what I need, so therefore I can't grow. But what can I be doing to go find my growing? My husband's getting a little tired of hearing that at dinner every day, but I'm passionate about it. So, okay. Other questions that you might have? Welcome, Christy.
Well,
Any problems you guys are running into? Go ahead, Carmen.
What I was going to say with the original question of what do you do to provide PD for the interpreters, just as you mentioned, the community learning, I have all the interpreters come in one computer lab and show them how to get in, say, hey, you can join this support group and, so forth. And here you go. Because once again, it's a lot of them, even with teachers I've seen, they just wait for someone to say, here's a PD opportunity, instead of actually looking for one. And it's always like, well, are you going to pay for it? Are you going to pay for it? And it's like, who needs to see you or I? You know, it's one of those. I mean, I don't mind paying, but at some point, like you said, they have to take that responsibility for their own learning. And I know that Region 11 last, in the fall, they still had some videos that were free for interpreters. They were free up to August, at the end of August. So when we came in the beginning of the school year, once again, put them all together on those computers, say, okay, look, Region 11 have all these free webinars. Pick and choose what's best for you, and here's your time. So don't tell me you don't have time to do this, because you could easily do it at home, but a lot of times you get distracted, right? This way, I'm like, no, you're sitting here, you have all today, earn as much as you can. So it's just, yeah, it's one of those.
There's ways around it. There's ways to do it. The thing I like about them doing it as a group, even if they're doing a recorded DVD as opposed to a live person, is you learn as much through that discussion as anything else. So there is a team up in this area. One of the things that Twyla set up a few years ago was Terpopoly, and it's 20 different PD sessions, and she even made a game board. So, and I think, Christy, it's actually out in your region where they took that, they blew it up and they mounted it on a wooden board. And the interpreters get together once a month, periodically, and they go through one of those sessions together. And so, yeah, there's not 7 different work, but the discussion that they're doing, as long as they don't get off track, some of those interpreters tend to get a little off track, but the discussion that they have, what does this mean for you? What does this mean for me? And I think my personal opinion on learning is I learn more from the people that I'm learning with than I do from the person who's teaching me usually, because, you know, they're telling me all the theory, but from everybody else around me, what does that look like in your classroom? What does it look like in mine? Because we may have different settings. So I think as much as possible, I'd like to see them learning together, as long as they're just not all sitting in the room watching videos without having interaction and discussion. My personal opinion. Okay.
Susie, what was the online training you were talking about that you said is going on or was going to start?
So we have our community of practice where we join in for our supervisors, have our group. If you go into the classes, there are tons of classes in there. There's probably 20 or more interpreter sessions that are anywhere from a 4-hour training to, if you do the 30-day ethics, I want to say that that's like 25 hours or something.
Okay.
If you do the, you know, it's all over the place. So yeah, there's lots of different options.
I've seen that one. I don't know. I got confused. I thought there was something else going on other than that. Like,
so those ones are, we call just in time. People can register for those whenever they want to. Okay. They can take them whenever they want to. They can register today and take 4 hours and do it all in one sitting. They can do it in a period of 3 months, whatever. But that one's not, none of those are real time where like we all get together on June 1st and do it together, unless you guys do it that way in your districts.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. We all know that an online learning is never going to replace a really good face-to-face learning. I mean, that's just a reality. But we also know that trying to get everybody on a schedule where they can all be there and not missing classes, but at the same time, not doing family time, nights, weekends, summers, it's hard to get stuff. It helps. Jerry, you were going to jump in?
Toggling 2 meetings right now, so I'm
okay.
Like, I'm sorry, I missed it. Will you say it again?
Oh, I just saw you pop on, so I wanted to make sure that.
I was trying to figure out which unmute I needed to unmute with. Chrissy, your shirt looks really cute. That's cute. Stand up so I can see it. Oh.
Yes, several people have asked about that. So it has Brazos River RDSPD, and then it has all of your districts, all of the SSA members.
I like it. Okay. I need
Isn't that awesome?
Okay.
Yeah. Brazos River always has fun t-shirts for their Deaf Ed. Is that the one that on the back says it's all good? Christy, on yours? Can't hear you, you're muted.
I would love a fun shirt.
Here, am I unmuted now?
Oh.
Can y'all hear me now?
Uh-huh.
Okay. I did this one myself because I have a Cricut, and so it took forever and it was a big old mess, but we're gonna try to screen print it and see if that works. I don't know.
That's cute.
Awesome. Angela Belding is famous for saying, it's all good, it's all good. So at one point they had a shirt that either on the back or on the front said, it's all good. It's cute.
Yes, that's true. And it was also purple because we like purple.
Yes, definitely. Okay. What are some other things you guys are running into, either in our new reality or just life as a supervisor in general?
Well, I talked to you about my funding problem and about more staff. So I think I came up with a creative way to pitch that idea. Hopefully this morning, say a prayer. But we have a few interpreters that aren't certified that when they were hired, I guess it was just looked over, but they paid them interpreter pay, which is just sad, and I feel bad for even thinking of it. But the district told them in September, you have until May to get certified, which I don't know how it will affect it with not being able to test. But of 3 of them, they haven't even mentioned it or had any intentions of testing. So if their pay went back down to para pay, because they are acting as a para and not an interpreter, then that difference from each of those 3 would buy me an interpreter. So I'm going to pitch that one this morning.
Yeah. Well, and I think on that whole postponing it or whatever, when were they told that they had until May?
The first day of school.
So I would have to say that, if they were registered for a test and it got canceled, that would be one thing. But if they haven't even registered, yeah, they've had plenty of time. So, and that's one thing I do want to talk about while I'm thinking about it, is the uncertified interpreters. If you look at rule, if you look at the law, we are not allowed to have interpreters that are uncertified. We also know the reality is sometimes there are not enough certified interpreters in an area to fill those positions. Even if we wanted to only hire, we could have a whole bunch of empty positions. So sometimes we have to hire uncertified people. The other consideration is, what is the need of the student? One of the things that one of our RDSPD does is, in the ARD meeting, they take it course by course by child. Okay, this is Johnny. What does Johnny need for him to actively participate in this course and learn from it? What level of instruction? In a gen ed? Does it need to be in a special ed? Does it need to be in a deaf ed? And then what type of communication access does he need? Does he need a deaf teacher? A deaf ed teacher where it's that tertiary communication? Just the 2, the dyadic. Or can it be a triadic where there's a 3rd person doing the interpreter? So they do that piece by piece. At some point, if somebody comes back and says, wait a minute, Johnny doesn't have a certified interpreter, they've got documentation to show that Johnny has what he needs not because we're cutting funds or not because the people aren't available. It's because we have documented that's what Johnny needs.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of other districts that have a position that they call an interpreter intern. And that interpreter intern position, the way that these two have it set up is they have to have already passed the written test, and they're just waiting to pass the actual performance test. And with that, they're given, one of the districts has a 2-year and one of them, I believe, has a 3-year. But the interpreter intern signs a contract to begin with. They courses, they can only do like art, PE, music at the elementary, and at the high school, it depends on the subject, possibly athletics, or depending on the needs of the kids and the level of interpreting of skills. I'm a certified interpreter. I wouldn't go in and interpret cosmetology. There's no way I'm qualified to do that. So they would look at things like that. They work with a mentor. They're required within their district to get twice as much PD as most of the other interpreters are required. They meet with a mentor on a weekly basis. And then partway through the year, they do start interpreting one academic class, partnering with the mentor, where at first they're observing, and then they're doing the interpreting, getting feedback from. So it is a build your own process.
Mm-hmm.
If that went to due process, before an intern is a child, the parents are all notified and asked. So if a parent is not willing to have an intern with their child, then the intern is not put that way. However, if it came down to it, it technically is against rule, but it's a grow your own. We're actually working towards it. I think saying in September, you have until May to get certified. If they have taken the test and haven't passed it, but they have proven that they have sat in PD on a weekly basis, they've met with a mentor, I would look at that totally different than somebody who just hasn't even bothered. Because doesn't bothered, what that tells me is they need me, they're not going to fire me, why bother? Moving them down to a para-pay instead of an interpreter pay, that would hurt.
So like the fire, but I do have one, sorry, let me turn this one on. I do have one that did Twyla's mentorship program, or I forgot what it's called right now, but and she actually followed through, and then I had 2 that did the program or the mentorship thing, and they passed their certification test. So that's something. But the other ones that haven't even, that were given that opportunity to join, because she took everyone, I think, then I didn't feel bad. I feel bad, but not as bad.
Yeah, and I would feel the same way. Our goal is to get all of our interpreters certified. If they can't pass the test because they don't have the skills, that's a different discussion than I'm afraid to try. I wouldn't have a problem as somebody who says I'm afraid to try to say, you've got until May, that's it. Knowing that I could be cutting my own throat because I desperately need the interpreters. But if they're not even willing to try, if they're that afraid of it, you know, to me, that's a growing point. Let's go take it. Take it, see how you do. What could we work on? You might accidentally pass it, who knows? And some of that will depend on if the district's paying for the test or if the individual is. It's not an expensive test, but if I were making $25,000 a year, I couldn't afford to take it. So that's a consideration.
And I even said, once you pass it, I'll reimburse you for that, just to try to give them a little bit more of an incentive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what Twyla did with the mentoring, we were not planning on taking everybody. We had a whole group of people who applied who really didn't qualify. They hadn't even either taken the TEP, the test of English proficiency, or hadn't passed it. There was enough of them that we decided to put them to go through an online course all year long, a deaf person who is a literacy specialist to work with them on getting their skills up to the TEP. If they were already certified, we weren't planning on taking them because, yay, we want them to move up in their certification, but they weren't our target audience. We had like 4 or 5 of them who did that. So Twyla is mentoring them and meeting with them and giving them feedback. It's different than the ones that are working towards certification, but we would love to have all of our educational interpreters to be, you know, further up than they are. So I'm glad we were able to do that. And I want to say that we have 12 or 13 that have passed the TEP who just need the performance test that we were able to pair. I think it's one-on-one. I think 2 mentors that have 2 mentees, but everybody else it's one-on-one. And we're planning on asking for funding to continue this next year. Because, I mean, to me, that's how we grow our own. Mm-hmm. But we've had a few mentees who were signed up and they were just like, this is too much work.
My people really liked it. And I got a lot of feedback. And so I have one that has been a high school interpreter / para for 10 years. I mean, fully capable probably of passing the test, just needs that extra little motivation or someone to tell her that she's ready besides her coworkers. And so she is going to do that program next year.
Good. The BEI is scary, but you don't know until you tried it. Carmen?
Well, I was going to say, I know that the test is not too expensive, but I don't know about the rest of you, but for us, it's my understanding that they have to travel. So that's what gets my people, is having to travel, the room and board and all that good stuff, because we're way out here in El Paso. People forget about us. And I'm sorry, Lubbock is not west as far as I'm concerned, just because, yeah, no. So, I mean, it's closer for my people to go to New Mexico, Arizona, than it is to go to Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, whatever. So I think that's what gets my people is the traveling.
So a few years ago, they had set one up there in El Paso. The problem that we run into with doing it, I'm not involved in that. The problem, but I've talked at length with people who have been involved in it, because that is a concern, and that's a very valid concern. So one of the things that they tried to do one year is do something in El Paso, and they had like one person sign up to take the test. And it's not cost effective for them to send somebody out there any more than to send somebody in. If you're sending people to communication skills workshop, in the summer, if they go to CSW, which again for you, Carmen, is it's a very inexpensive training, but by the time you do travel, it adds up. They can get scheduled to take it there. And that's one of the things that I am hoping at some point that BEI will look into, is doing a tele testing, but there's a lot of old school people there who don't really understand it, and so that hasn't happened yet. If you had like 3 or 4 or 5 people who could take it, it would be easier to convince them to come out than if you just had 1 or 2 people. Just something to think about. Okay. Bye, Patty. Thanks for coming in. Any of the rest of you having problems with finding certified interpreters or getting your interpreters to take the test or things like that?
I have a slightly different question about interpreters. There's constant battle in my district about overtime pay, like how they're paid. And I'm just curious how other people do it, because they have mine, I'm trying to think of the wording the district uses, but basically that they're hourly employees and they're paid up to whatever it is, 36 hours. So then if, let's say, like Friday is a holiday, everybody would be paid for that holiday. But if there's an overtime need earlier in the week for an interpreter, like a football game, the district washes that overtime into that Friday, saying, well, we're not going to pay you overtime because you're not working on Friday. Well, none of my interpreters will take anything on a holiday week because they all know it. And they tell each other, don't take it because they're not going to pay you. You'll get paid for Friday for, basically you're losing your money. So I don't know how to, does that happen everywhere, or are we doing something weird to cause that? I'm just curious about feedback about overtime pay. It's such a nightmare in our district.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'd love to hear from the rest of you.
In Mesquite, our district tried to go to that as well. And so it was anything from that 36 to 40 hours was not overtime. And then after that was overtime. And they wanted them to clock in and then clock out. Well, if you're in the middle of a football game, you can't clock in and clock out for then that overtime. And then they wanted that overtime to be on an extra duty form that regional day paid for separately. And so it was a hot mess. So we've kind of just had our people clock out this year, and any of their interpreting we've been doing on an interpreter service form. And then if we have a normal pay rate and then an additional pay rate if it's after hours. And we've just been paying ours like that this year until we get our hands slapped. But just so we're fair to our people.
So Jerry, your interpreters are paid by the district, not by the RDSPD?
They're paid by the RDSPD, but I'm just talking about different forms and different budget code. Mm-hmm. So it's
like, wow, why did you manage that?
No, they get a separate check for like traveling and interpreting. So it's separate from their payroll, their 36 hours a week check.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Jerry and Christy, do you guys bill those overtime hours back to the SSA members?
We do.
Yeah, I've seen how Jerry does it. She had shown me hers a while back. I just have trouble getting buy-in from the district. They're really difficult. They don't want to do that. So they just say no. And that's kind of the end of the conversation. It's hard for me. And I even said one day, okay, then I guess we're going to have to use an agency. Here's how much that costs. And the district was like, okay. So, I mean, they don't even care that it comes out of my pocket. So if it's more for an agency, they're just like, okay, whatever, then do that, pay the agency. But I would prefer to pay my interpreters because they know the kids and that's cheaper and it's still my money. I just don't understand. I don't know how to negotiate with them better than what I'm doing, but it's a problem. I don't know. I was just curious. I had heard Jerry's. I love what she's doing. I was curious if how other people are doing it.
If we have after hours interpreting or parent ARDs that are not one of our regional day, for one of our regional day students, I do contract those out and make the district pay for those. They do not come out of regional day funding. They're just for a normal special ed kid parent because I do want them to see how much it costs. So I want it to be a reality check too, in a way, in a nice way.
Right. We have someone in the district that takes care of getting any kind of interpreter, not just sign language, when it comes to adults so a deaf parent for an ARD, or parent-teacher conferences. But it's interesting, when I first came in, anything that had to do with an interpreter, they expected me to handle, even like at the beginning of the school year with the whole district getting together. They're like, well, do you have interpreters? And I'm like, no. These are district employees that you as a district need to get an interpreter. And that's it, because this is part of what you're asking them to come and participate, not for them to work as an interpreter. So, or even one of the elementary campuses that houses one of our programs, she has a parent who's deaf, whose kid is not deaf. He's in the general ed section, not even related with us at all. and she still expects our interpreters to interpret for that mom. And my thing is, you know what, if our interpreters are busy with our students, no, it's not going to happen. And I keep sending email after email, letting them know what the district procedure is when it comes to needing an interpreter. If it's an adult, whether it's a parent, an employee, it's the district's responsibility, not mine. Our RDSPD interpreters are there for our students.
IDB funds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, to your funds or special ed, you're not allowed to use special ed fund that way. Now, sometimes we are kind and do that if our interpreters aren't doing something else, but those kids come first. And I wouldn't want to go to court and say, I'm sorry, parent, your child didn't get the appropriate services in the IEP because Mrs. Smith, who isn't one of our kids' parents or one of our kids, needed them. But yeah, how about the rest of y'all for the hourly interpreter and pay and all that kind of stuff?
We do something similar to Jerry and Temple. When they have extra like football games or something they need to interpret for, they clock out and then they get an extra duty form and fill it out for that. So they have their hours, they're paid, and anything after 4 o'clock or whenever the school gets out, that will be extra duty for them. And then I have the district, if there is even if for our staff, if our staff has an in-service or who are deaf or hard of hearing, the district pays for those interpreters. We do not, because they are district employees. So the district has to get the contract interpreters and they pay for that out of their district funds. So we're only paying, for student interpreter services. That's how we do it.
I like that.
Christy and Crowley, I'm fortunate that Larry still does all the money, so I don't have to deal with it. But we do pay after hours, and then if they're working on a holiday, they're going to get straight pay. They don't get the overtime. So you might call Larry and check with him how he set all that up with the district.
Okay, thanks. That gives me some ideas. I may just have to go to my board and see if we can work around the district, because it's the cluster site district holds an awful lot of power that I don't truly understand why they hold all that power, but they do. So, oh wait, you're muted, Susie.
My dog keeps barking, so I forgot I muted. I'm going to post that on the community of practice to find out how everybody does it. It's a discussion we normally have once a year at least, so I'll also bring up some of our previous discussions. You guys are not the only one that usually people get paid for 37.5 hours, and after 40 hours is considered overtime, so they still have to, like they are donating that 37.5 hours until 40, and then they get paid overtime, but everybody does it a little bit differently. So Brittany, do you know how you guys handle that in Arlington? Hmm? The internet's going.
Sorry, my internet was acting all crazy.
Mine too.
So what I know is our interpreters, well, we don't have any, first of all, we don't have any certified interpreters. So our interpreter / communication facilitators, they clock in every day and clock out according to their campus hours. And then anything additional that they do, whether it's extracurricular or a staff meeting or what other sign club or anything like that, they end up filling out a PA. And then that goes to Melody and she signs off on it and they get paid like extra duty pay.
I thought you had some that were certified.
We had one and she left us.
Isn't Gary certified?
Is Gary, let me think.
Launch?
Oh, yes. Our high school people, I'm sorry. I'm thinking we don't have any certified at our elementary or junior high. I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay. So from the 37 hours to the 40 hours, are they getting paid extra for that, or is that still considered part of their regular pay?
That's considered part of their regular pay.
Okay.
So it's the same thing. They're donating those extra like 3.5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then after that, are they getting paid time and a half?
Yeah.
They get paid a different rate. It's not their, I just don't know exactly what that is, but it is a different rate.
Isn't that the same for you, Jerry, that it's just a different, it's not necessarily time and a half. You're paying a different rate for that extra duty?
Yes.
That you just came up with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, it's still, if we went, and we're still kind of in that negotiation for next year, because if we did do the 40 hours and then do time and a half, we think they would make more money, but we've tried to give them their extra duty pay to make sure they're making enough money as what they would for that time and a half. And then we have it by certification, non-certified, which we only have one that does like drill team that's non-certified. And then we have certified, and then we have like extended hours or weekends for like band trips and things like that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like I had one more.
Well, and the having the different rate versus time and a half helps if you've got, somebody who's been interpreting for 25 years with the district versus somebody who's been interpreting with 2 years. Time and a half is going to look very different for them, but interpreting a football game would look similar. So having a, $25 an hour or whatever makes it fair, more equitable on theirs. So, okay, I'm going to post a question in the discussion group too, just to kind of get feedback. I think you're going to find it's all over the place, but in general, they're needing that last 3 hours or 2.5. Okay. Other questions? That after-hour interpreter ends up being a lot of discussion, especially as you're looking at overnight trips, and does the interpreter have to be on the bus or do they take their own car, and all sorts of, I've been in this position for almost 10 years, and that's probably the question that pops up the most. And I mean, there are districts who have sent a teacher with a student for an overnight trip rather than interpreters, because the teacher is salaried and they don't have to pay him overtime, where the interpreter has to be overtime. Never mind that it's something like cheerleading, where the interpreter's been with the child all year long and knows all the routines, but the teacher doesn't. But that's out of, a lot of times out of our hands.
Yeah, I actually interpreted a couple of things toward the end of the year, because as the interpreters got more angry with the district, they were like, no, we're not going to do it. And then I ended up doing things that I felt like I'm not qualified. I've never been in this class before, but I feel like I'm just getting put in a really weird position where the kid needs someone. So, and with just a few hours notice, I can't even get an agency, with that short of notice. So it was getting very frustrating toward the end of the semester, where the interpreters are mad. I don't blame them. And several of them work for agencies. So they were just like, forget y'all, I'm gonna go work, I can get an agency job and make way more, and I don't have to deal with this. And they're not mad at me. They're just trying to make a point to the district. But in the end, I'm the one who gets punished royally, and I have the money. I'm like, I want to pay them. Just let me pay them. It's so frustrating.
We have the money for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things that, is continually an issue is the interpreters not getting paid. The interpreter pay all across the board needs to go up. And TASB, the Texas Association of School Boards, does a survey every year, or every few years, to find out what all of the districts are paying different staff members. So when somebody contacts them and says, how are you paying interpreters? They do that, and then they can make an analysis to find out where your interpreters are getting paid compared to everybody else in the districts. What we are proposing to TASB is that instead of just looking at districts, they need to look at agencies, universities, hospitals, because for a teacher, your competition is other schools. It is not outside groups, unless you're leaving teaching completely. For an interpreter, we're not competing against other school districts as much as we're competing against community universities, hospitals. So, you know, I can't, when I was teaching full-time and working as an interpreter as well, I couldn't have afforded to raise 2 kids on an interpreter salary, even with my husband having a good salary. I mean, a lot of our interpreters are making $25,000 to $30,000 a year. And yes, they've got benefits, and yes, they've got summers off where they could do contract work, but it doesn't always even out. And we've got 2 districts that are paying $14,000 a year for their interpreter salary. I'm like, why would you stay? But
Susie, and is that because, this is what I've been told, and I could be wrong, once again, still learning, that the state of Texas does not see interpreters as professionals. They see them as paraprofessionals, versus our neighbor here in New Mexico, they see them as professionals. So I know here in El Paso, a lot of our people just go literally 30 minutes down to New Mexico, and they get paid more. So am I missing something? Because I know that's something I've been wanting to bring up to the board is pay. I wanted to see, not only compare apples to apples, meaning our RDSPD with others in the state, but also ours with agencies, because that is our competition, you know, because even a lot of the agencies will hire non-certified people and still get paid more than what we could offer.
Exactly. And then when we can't fill our positions because we can't find certified people, we contract with the agency, pay 3 times as much, and ended up with somebody non-certified. How does that help us?
How is that?
So it really to the school districts.
Because I've been fussing with the district even right now. When you go look at my interpreter job opening, you have to click on non-certified positions, and then it says interpreter under there, which they are absolutely certified. But so I think an interpreter might not ever find the position because they would never click on non-certified positions. They're going to click on certified positions. How do you address that? It's so frustrating.
So it's not non-certified, it's non-classified. So any of the hourly employees, the secretaries, the paraprofessionals, the interpreters are all considered non-classified. But that really comes down to the school board in the decision that they make with HR, and they're usually basing it on TASB's recommendations. It's not something from TEA. We have 2 districts who have interpreter positions as professional positions if they have a bachelor's degree. So if they have a bachelor's degree and are certified interpreter, they are considered a professional, a classified instead of unclassified. The problem with that is classified professionals don't get paid overtime, except for something like summer school. So as a teacher or as a classified professional interpreter, I could have to do all the Friday night football games and not get paid overtime. So it actually benefits the district to pay them as professionals, because then they can ask for some. Now, like coaches and everybody, you know, all of the sponsors get a little stipend. And so if I had if my interpreters were professional positions and I was asking them to interpret Friday night, I would do a stipend like that, but it wouldn't be a time and a half or, you know, the extra duty pay as they're getting now. So there are some interpreters who live for that extra duty pay, and they're actually probably making more with the extra duty pay than they would if they were getting a professional salary, which is still not as much as a teacher, but is more than an interpreter. That comes to the school board and understanding interpreter positions. And I think that's where TASB stuff is really, unless TASB comes out and says, these people are professionals and need more than a para 3 level pay or whatever, it's not going to happen. We do have a spreadsheet where, you know, we have one that we ask for everybody to put in their tuition so that we can compare tuition. It helps RDS. We also have one. The problem is some are like, we'll have some that put it in as per hour. We pay $23.03 an hour. And then you've got some who do it per month and some who do it per year. So it's hard to kind of compare it. And not everybody puts them in, you know, and then you've got your non-certified level 1, level 3, and all that kind of stuff as well. But it's a certain place. Okay. Does that help some? I think my internet's frozen again. And there's not a good answer, Christy. I mean, I really wish that we had a good answer to how to deal with that, but it really comes down to the school boards.
Yeah, I feel like it's just an ongoing negotiation. I just want to be fair to my people. I like them, and I definitely don't want to lose any of them. We have 4 certified interpreters. I would like to hang on to them. They're awesome.
Yeah. And most of them are ones that are looking to get that higher certification. And if they can make 3-4 times as much in the community as in a classroom, unless pay doesn't matter and they just need the insurance, whatever.
But with the amount that insurance costs, they probably don't get much left afterwards. And you see in here, here in El Paso, we have the community college that has an interpreting program, but what I'm seeing is that I don't think they're doing a good job in educating them per se, because what's happening for me is that they're coming out and either they decide not to take the test because they know they can get hired through an agency without being certified and make more, or they do take the test but are not passing it, or they're being encouraged to further their education, which that's great and all, but the problem is by them doing that and not having anything locally to have a bachelor's in interpreting, what's happening is that they're moving on to the university majoring in something else. And so I'm pretty much screwed with either way you see it, because the program's not graduating enough interpreters as far as I can tell, or enough for them to be hired.
And most of them were not graduating people who were ready to pass a test. They are limited in the number of hours, interpreting hours that they can require of their students. And so even though there are some top ones in the state, with their interpreting program. And I would have to say that yours is not, unfortunately. And you're right, we have one university that are online. Most of are face-to-face. No, Lamar's is an ASL teacher certification. Sorry, not an interpreting. So, yeah, the internet is not very right now. Try and switch. No, it's. I'm switching. Is that better? Okay. I'm trying to switch internets. I've got like 3 different options, so hopefully that will. So, okay, good. We've got, I want to say that there's 13 interpreter training programs, and only 2 of them are really very strong in interpreting, graduating interpreters that are very strong. Some of the interpreter training programs also have a very strong bias. You know how, until now, people used to say, those who can do, those who can't teach, really negative. And, you know, some of the interpreting training programs kind of look as educational interpreters as those who can't cut it in the community. Those 2 programs that are really strong programs have very strong training that interpreting is good interpreting, and you actually need your higher level interpreters in education rather than in the community, because then you're never going to build strong signers. But a lot of the bias is not towards education. I'd like to see that changed, but yeah. Okay. Other questions or thoughts or anything I can help with in the next few minutes? We are going to continue the Tuesday afternoon and the Thursday morning water cooler chats through the end of May. At this plan, you're welcome to join in, welcome to just watch a recording afterwards. If you've got specific questions, always, you can email me, you can text me, you can put it in the community of practice. I'm going to put my cell phone number in case you don't have it. I think most of you have it, but you are always welcome to send me a text, especially if you send an email and don't hear back from me pretty quickly. Send me a text, because sometimes I get over inundated with emails, and sometimes your email may get kind of lost in the shuffle. So yes, I will send the links. Mm-hmm.
I have a last minute question. It's not related to interpreters, but I just wanted to ask real quick.
Okay.
So since ECSD is going full day, I wanted to know how many programs are having their 3-year-olds go full day? Or are y'all just doing 4-year-olds?
All of our 3-year-olds go full day. Of course, it's an ARD committee decision, and the district recommends the half day, but all of ours we recommend full day for.
Okay, we're trying to do that, and we're getting a little pushback, so I just wanted to know what other programs were doing that.
We do the same that Jerry said. The district recommends half day for 3-year-olds, but we recommend full day for most of ours. There have been a couple that we haven't recommended it for different reasons, or we tried it and then we took it back because it wasn't successful for that particular kiddo. But all of our 3- and 4-year-olds stay full day for the most part, as the ARD committee decides.
Yeah, and I did get a lot of pushback from it too at the beginning. I'm not gonna lie. So like keep going with it, because my district did kind of fight me on that one. We even recommended if push came to shove, the partial day, and then every 6 weeks, based on documentation, increasing the time by 1 hour to 2 hours. So by the end of the year, they would be a full day. But overall, it's an ARD community decision, and if the parent wants full day, then we gave them full day.
That's what we do. Yeah, we have, we recommend full day. And of course, it's the ARD committee decision, unless the parent is really, really against it for some reason. We've been trying to get everyone full day.
Okay.
Our deaf ed teacher is actually only a half-day employee at this time. She had a baby and she wanted to go half-time, and she's amazing. And so as we were trying to negotiate through that, our majority of our instruction happens in the morning in our class. And then in the afternoon, we have a super overqualified assistant that helps with crossover and practice. And the kids do take a nap and they have their center time. And so it kind of works out well where they're more ready to learn and ready to go in the morning. And then in the afternoon, it's kind of a little bit more laid back. And that's when we have our recess, and there's lots of language practice happening. And then we do have another deaf ed teacher that steps in at the end of the day to provide a little bit more of instructional time that we thought needed to be there. But that's a thought too, that we realized, kind of a half of a deaf ed teacher can provide the morning instruction, and then we have a different model in the afternoon, and it's worked for us. So this will be our 3rd year, I think, going in doing it that way.
I did my student teaching in preschool, one of my student teaching, and what I found, because my first thought is, well, they're sleeping all afternoon, why bother? But the language that they got from the lunch, which if they were half day, normally they didn't stay for lunch, then the taking the shoes off and getting their cot out and putting their blanket, and just the language involved in getting ready for the nap and then putting stuff away, and just that our kids, when they're going home, most of them aren't getting that language. And just, it was such a language rich, even if they were sleeping for, an hour. And we had some kids who did a good 2-hour nap. We didn't wake them up if that's what they needed, but you can't replicate that language. And if you're looking at half a day, especially if they're eating breakfast, we'd have kids that would get there at 7:30, eat breakfast, put all their school stuff away, and then we'd do instruction until 10:30, figuring that the first hour was the getting started and the last 30 to 45 minutes was the going home. The instruction part of the day was an hour, hour and a half maybe. And I don't want to say why bother at that point, because any language is better than nothing. But for most of our kids, that just wasn't enough.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it really should be an art committee decision and what the parents want. But
yeah, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Any other questions or concerns? Or thank you guys for taking your time out to come this morning. I know everybody's about tired of Zoom and is very, very busy, but it's good to see everybody's faces. That's my biggest upset about Deal is, breathing the air with people that get it for 3 days just puts me on a high for the next 6 months till I see everybody again. So
thank you for doing this for us.
Well, you're welcome. And I'm always here. So if we need some time specifically for new people, or just even if we need to do a one-on-one, just let me know. I'm here to help. So, okay. Y'all stay safe. Wash your hands. All that kind of stuff. We'll talk to you later. Bye.